Preaching is an unusual task. Week after week, preachers stand up and talk about what is hopefully very important stuff. We put words on complexities that are essentially beyond words. We lead lives studded with the same finite frailties as anyone else, and then are asked to speak the words of the holy and infinite God. We embrace the arrogance of talking on behalf of God, because I guess somebody has to do it. We are asked to speak openly about experiences and feelings that most people, at least in our little corner of the world, rarely whisper. We try to talk about the most important things in the world without seeming crazy, or offensive, or trivial, or simply incomprehensible. Talking about really important things is not easy for any of us, preachers or not. There are dozens of topics that are difficult to talk about: sex, money, love, identity, aging, mistakes, death, and God. Polite society has not figured out how to talk about politics or religion without defensiveness and fear, and we resist those discussions because of the power of them, they sort of degenerate into defensiveness, humor, or triteness, and as well they should, because there's a part of us that knows that these deeply important things, these deeply important experiences, might be spoiled by words. Not clear enough, not perfect enough. James Joyce, an American writer, uses pages and pages of obscure and novel words to capture one moment of a character's thought. And even after pages and pages to capture just 1 second of consciousness, they still fall flat. In The Dead, he writes, "Why is it that words like these seem dull and cold? It is because there is no word tender enough to be your name." Even just the name of God in the Old Testament, people have mixed feelings, too special, too holy to speak, or even sometimes to write. And so there are placeholders for the name of God. There is some holiness that is profaned in the attempt to tie it to a set of sounds or symbols. And so many of us distrust the facile use of words to capture the essence of any experience or existence. We are suspicious of preachers and politicians who might try to take our diverse and unique experience and make it fit into some. We argue in our heads when we listen to folks. Even the most simple declarations, feeling that no one sentence can ever get it right. And it's a wonder that we talk at all, actually, when we really think about it. And even Jesus himself said, whatever you say, be simply yes or no, and any more comes. Jesus, who sends us so many mixed messages in this Holy Week, Jesus who is silent before Pilate, and yet Jesus who fails to silence his disciples on Palm Sunday and says even the stones would cry out. Jesus who early on cautions people not to speak about how he healed them. Don't tell anybody, he says to people early on. And then later gives the Great Commission to go out into the world and teach. And here it says, go out into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole of creation. So what is it? Are we supposed to be quiet, or are we supposed to shout it from the mountaintops? In the Easter reading morning from Mark, the young man tells the women who have come to the tomb early to go back and tell the disciples what they have seen. The commandment is from this young man, go and tell the disciples this story. And even though he has told that to them, the original version, before it gets a little easier, says they went and fled from the tomb and said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. As well they should have been, because the other Gospels, and even this one, talks about how they go back and tell people nobody believes them. They think they're crazy or nuts. I think who wants people to think that of them? So while this original abrupt ending of the book of Mark strikes us as odd, it in fact conveys a true light that sometimes things are too awesome for the confetti of words. Now we know this on Christmas Eve. On Christmas Eve, we all get together and we sing Silent Night, and then there's the moment where the candles hiss, and we're all happy and comfortable with that silence that is peace. And there is a silence here on Easter morning, too. In the Gospel of Mark, there is this silence of, I have no idea what this means. Please don't make me say something about it. There are people who have looked into the plastic egg and go, I am just not feeling like talking this morning. I don't really know what it is that's in there. Why are you making me do this? Did you sense him? There is this anticipatory silence where it doesn't make sense. The old structures are still in place, and it seems too crazy to be true. And I don't want to be the first one to say it. And yet, at some point later, even later in the day, the disciples have gotten used to talking about this. They have shared the experience, and somehow their tongues are loosed, and they can now say things that before seemed too strange. Apparently, there's a time for everything. There's a time for silence. There's a time that we avoid the babble of our half-built towers of reason. And there's a time to take the limitations of language seriously and to be quiet and to go, I have no idea. And then there is a time to speak. A time to share, to open ourselves to the dramatic risk of meaning-making that we do together with the grace of God. Imagine if the women had remained silent that Easter, because they are the ones that brought the other disciples back. They had this experience, they go and tell the other disciples, and then the other disciples run to the tomb, have this experience, and then the Easter celebrations and confusions begin. Imagine if the Gospel of Mark had been the end. Imagine if they were petrified by fear and did not say anything to the disciples. We would not be here. The message of Easter would have died there, and then they changed the world by sharing the mystery even when they were afraid how they might speak it. So what is there for us in this story? We gain here the understanding that our faith is a transformation of an inchoate mystery to a shouted hallelujah. We sing the songs in the hymnal because sometimes we are afraid of singing them in any other sort of fashion. Go tell it on the mountain, the day of resurrection, earth tell it out abroad. Come ye faithful, raise the strain, the Lord, Christ the Lord is risen today. All creation join to say, hallelujah. And we sing it, but we might have trouble saying that over the lunch table. But Christianity apparently does not come through genetics, or by the sword, or certainly by legislation. It comes through the Word. But as well as our faith, we need to understand that our whole life will remain in shadows in the tomb until we gather the courage, and yes, maybe even the faith, to tell people what we have seen, to share our stories, however unreasonable they are, however shameful they are. We will only come out of the tomb when we tell people what we have seen. To change the world, and to change our world, we need to talk about important things. We need to talk about important things. We need to spread the news, even when we don't understand the news. We need to spread the news that things, when they are powerful. We need to talk about the things that we could be wrong about. We need to talk about the things that we don't have the words to make it fit just right. We need to talk about the things that resist simplification. And we are apparently called to this task, even though it is daunting. And like the women at the tomb, we don't want to do it because we're afraid of naming the problems or the miracles. We've already started that task as a community. Storytelling, either autobiographical or fictional, is a way of getting at important truths, using words, telling a narrative of meaning. So we have, for the last few years, been having these groups that have been springing up. A lot of them. I've been surprised at how many. We have storytelling groups, 2, 3, 4 of them. A writers group going as people are trying to make sense of the world with the words of the world. 2 weeks ago, Stacy Midge told us the frightening story that she could have kept locked in the tomb of privacy, and we discovered again the core values of the gospel, that is, vulnerability, and strength. So I will tell you a story about a brush I had with God. One of 2 or 3 that I don't like talking about because I don't understand it. I don't like talking about it because you might, I don't know. So it was a couple months after my mother died. I was 18. And I was sitting in the living room. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what I was doing up at that hour, but when you're 18, that happens. I'm just sitting on the blue couch. And suddenly there was a presence in the room. I didn't hear voices. I didn't see anything. But I knew I was not alone. There was a presence that was powerful and multiple. And I was afraid that something would happen. I wouldn't get to tell people about this because it was so important. But it didn't, was it Jesus? I don't know if it was Jesus, but it was one of the most powerful events in my life. It was a feeling of presence and power, and I don't understand it. These are the events that we all have. Every one of you has a powerful event in your heart, but you don't really have the right words for it. But we gather together to share the holy sacraments of these words and to try and find what God is trying to speak to us. And so, that's one of my stories. That's one of my brushes with the divine, and I still don't know what to think about it. We learn from powerful experiences, and at our best we learn to trust each other so that we might grow from each other's stories. We learn from these stories. We learn from these experiences that these people didn't understand either, that were fearful, that were so strange that they were silenced by them for fear of how people did hear the messages. You don't know what you're talking about. They said over and over again to these folks who are trying to report the powerful stories. But we still need to share the mystery and even the fear for the truth to heal the world. And so I call us all to make the transformation on this Easter, to move from silence about the things that have marked us, that we perhaps don't understand. That perhaps you fear speaking what you love. Change the world. Share the mystery. Perhaps you fear a shame that makes no sense. people, by what you would say, change the world, share the mystery. That is how our faith became the thing that changed the world. That is how we are charged with speaking what is true, no matter how painful. It is only in the context of the global forgiveness that we can even attempt such a task. We might get it wrong. The words might come out strangely. But our God and our friends will know this. We are trying to share our lives. So I encourage you, over dinner or whenever, to try again and again to talk about what is most important. Even though we have conspired to keep each other from doing these things. But again and again, we talk about what we really need, what's really important, what will change the world. And then, in the very speaking, the world will change. May the grace of Jesus Christ that stands with us in every moment, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit that binds us together in this meaning-making that we participate in